Hey guys, my name is Matumio, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. And to get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question, you can do so by leaving a comment down below. I would normally say you could send me a YouTube message, but for some reason, YouTube is getting away with that system. So if a comment doesn't tickle your fancy, you can also send me a message over Twitter and Facebook. The first question for today is, what did you think about adding in animations to entering and exiting vehicles in Battlefield 4? This is a fantastic idea. The Battlefield community has been whispering about adding in animations into their game for what feels like forever. Like, I remember my friends talking about animations all the way back in Bad Company 2, and while it's not game-breaking, like, let's be honest, this has been a part of the Battlefield franchise from the very beginning. Like, Battlefield 1942, this was the way you got in and out of vehicles. And it does work with the current game mechanics, getting into jets or getting into helicopters. It makes sense that there isn't an animation. But even still, this would add a further layer of polish if it was done correctly. It would make the game more realistic, but it also change the way that vehicle combat works a little bit. You have probably been in a situation, I don't think I'm alone on this, where you're about to kill someone, but then a tank spawns directly next to them, or they're just near a tank. They instantly jump on into it because, of course, there isn't an animation, and because you're playing as the assault, or really any class at that point, the tank is at 100% health, they just whip that massive cannon around and slap you around with it. Like, there's nothing you can do when that mechanic is in place. Now, how interesting would it be if they couldn't do that and they had to go through like a quick 2-second animation? They jump onto the tank, open to the latch, then jump on in, and at that point, as long as the player that is shooting on them is at least decent, or they didn't go through all of their rounds and they can at least track through that animation, they can easily take them out. That would make it so that people can't abuse that game mechanic. I don't want to say it's a glitch because, like I said, it's been a part of the Battlefield franchise forever, but you guys know people will abuse that as often as they can because it is a safety net. Like, if you are next to a tank and you know what you're doing, you can jump in and out whenever the situation is appropriate, and it can save your life. Like, it is a mechanic that people will abuse, and they do it. They've been doing it forever. But if you did have that animation in place, that tactic would just go completely out the window, and it would make it so that if you are getting in and out of a vehicle, you have to think a little bit more about it. And also along these same lines, if you are in a tank, for example, and you're fighting against another tank, if you're about to die, you're gonna have to go down with the ship more often than not, and this would require players to either fully commit to a tank fight or just jump out of it 2 shots ahead, because they know if they wait longer, or if they wait to the very last second like they do right now, they're not going to be able to live through that. And so this then opens up the situation where if they're abandoning tanks because they know they're not going to win, if the other tank driver knows what's up, he can then allow that tank to not die, and then one of his buddies can come on in and steal it. Like I said, this would change the vehicle dynamic a little bit. It wouldn't be a complete overhaul of the system by any means. Like, for the most part, Battlefield would continue to be the same thing that it is right now, but because it adds a little bit of thought process there, it would change the way a little bit of these situations play out. And so overall, I think that this is a solid recommendation. It would require more development time on the part of DICE, and we already know that they're already struggling with their development time, and so maybe they don't want to put the resources into creating these animations, but if they did, it would add a further level of polish. It would make the game slightly more realistic. You're going to be able to just instantly jump in and out of vehicles. And overall, I just think that it would add a nice dynamic into the game. The next question for today comes from Chris, and it is, what did you think of the new Call of Duty Advanced Warfare multiplayer reveal? Well, I wasn't blown away by it. It looks like Call of Duty. I'm sure it's going to play just like Call of Duty, and if you liked all the past CoD games, you're going to like this one. But what I was impressed by is that it seems like they're finally deviating a little bit from the formula that all of the past games had, and that came in the form of the movement system and the jetpacks. A lot of people were trying to draw parallels to Titanfall because, of course, Titanfall has their jetpacks. And while I can see that correlation, what I was getting more of a vibe from was Crysis. Crysis had the nano suit, which made you super buff, and so if you punch someone, they fly across the screen, much like the example that they were showing with the knife and the exo suit. You can also stealth in Crysis, which I think is also a feature in the multiplayer. And overall, I was just getting a Crisis vibe, but set in the Call of Duty franchise. And I think that that's sort of cool, because I like Crisis. Crisis 3 I thought was a fun multiplayer. It didn't have nearly the polish that the Call of Duty franchise has, or the community, and so the fact that it seems like COD is going down that route, I'm okay with it. The one thing that I was impressed by was the movement system, though. Like, the idea and the prospect of jumping up and then being able to, like, dive bomb downstairs, or being able to strafe to the left or the right, and you're just gonna rocket in those directions, that's awesome. Like, that is going to increase the movement of this game by tenfold. And while I'm sure they're gonna have to balance it out, maybe you're not able to use it every couple of seconds, or, you know, they're gonna have to make it so that people aren't able to spam it by any means. But even still, that could just be the thing that revitalizes the franchise for me. Like, COD has gotten a little stale. I never picked up COD Ghost. I heard it was one of the worst in the series. But even still, if this movement system is done correctly, it could breathe some freshness in the series, not only for me, but I think for a lot of gamers out there. The one thing that I was a little worried about hearing, though, was how they kept talking about vertical gameplay and how all of their maps were going to have a lot of verticality on them. Vertical combat is fine. Like, if it's done sparingly, if it's well balanced, it can add a nice flair and a twist to a map. But as soon as you make it so that your entire map, like all of your maps, are centered around vertical combat, it is difficult to make them well balanced and enjoyable to play on. For most first-person shooters, everything is on ground level, and because of that, at a glance, as you round a corner, it's very easy to identify where the enemy is. Like, if they're, you know, behind a barrel, you round the corner and all it is a long hallway, you're going to be able to identify where the enemy is. But as soon as you bring in a second, a third, and a fourth story, you at a quick glance no longer can have that information readily at your fingertips. Like, you're going to be having to constantly looking up and down, left and right, trying to figure out where the action is. And now that there's this second, third, or fourth story running down that hallway where normally you would see the person behind the barrel, they're now off to the left-hand corner on the fourth story or third story, and they're sniping you from a location that you can't readily see. And so as soon as you bring in this verticality and you bring this aspect into Call of Duty, it's going to be more angles that people are going to have to look out for, it's going to be more places that they can get shot from, and it's going to be nearly impossible for you to be able to check every single one of these angles before you cross the street or before you're moving around, and it could lead to some frustrating gameplay where you just constantly feel like you have no idea where the enemy could be coming from, and you're just dying from random directions. It doesn't make for the best gameplay, and it leads to some very frustrating gameplay. And so as long as they're able to make these maps well balanced and flow correctly, and make it so that there isn't just a million angles that the enemy can shoot you from down below and up above, then it can be fantastic. Like, I'm crossing my fingers that they're going to be able to do it, but that is my biggest concern about the reveal. But overall, I'm just happy to see that they are finally doing something a little bit different from past Call of Duty games. Ironically, a lot of people are harping on, you know, Advanced Warfare for that aspect, which is just silly because they're probably the same people that are claiming that Call of Duty never changes. But even still, with that movement system, if done correctly, if it's a lot of fun, it could be the one thing that finally gets me to buy a modern Call of Duty title. The next question comes from Axel, and it is, what do you think about a squad leader being able to spawn on other squad leaders? I feel that this would give a squad leader the ability to support other squads and open up a spawn point for their squad mates. Thoughts? Now, this is an interesting take on the squad system. I think the only way we'd ever fully understand if this would be a good addition into the game is if they tested it, like on the CTE server, for example. But the one thing that I am a little hesitant about is that with the current squad dynamics, if your entire squad wipes, that is supposed to be a penalty. They're trying to make sure that there is some squad teamwork, some squad cohesion, and as soon as the squad leader can just bounce everywhere on the map, that diminishes that squad cohesion a little bit. That being said, though, at the same time, this could also be amazing in the grander schemes of teamwork. Now, the best example of that I can think of is if that you're on a map and your entire team is just bogged down on one objective. The enemy has you completely surrounded, you're just getting pummeled, and there's no way for you to get out. If one of the squads was able to flank around, the squad leader, you know, got his buddies to work together, and they started to flank around, that could then give the other squads the opportunity, use him as a spawn point, and then co-capture the other objectives. Like I said, the only way I think we would get a true understanding if this would be a fun system or a good system is if they test it out. So I like your idea. I think it's an interesting concept, but I really have no idea if this would be a good addition into the game. The next question for today is, what's your take on the new Tomb Raider game being an Xbox One exclusive? I admittedly was a little upset when I first learned about this. They have come out and said that this will be a timed exclusive for the Xbox One, so they're not completely ignoring the PC and the PlayStation 4 community. But I can't even wrap my head around why they even did this. Not only because of the PR disaster that it's been over the last couple of days, but also because I can't see why anyone would buy an Xbox One for a timed exclusive Tomb Raider game. The one that came out in 2013 was fantastic. I picked it up on Steam. I was like, yeah, I can definitely see myself getting back into the Tomb Raider franchise. They did a phenomenal job with that title, but even still, it doesn't feel like a system seller to me. It's not a Last of Us, it's not a Halo, it's not an Uncharted game, and while I'm not trying to knock on Tomb Raider by any means, it's not to that level, in my humble opinion. And so to see Microsoft giving money to them to make it a timed exclusive doesn't make any sense to me, because I just can't see anyone justifying or going out and be like, I need to have Tomb Raider right now. Like, I need it right now. Even if it's gonna come out on the other systems in a couple of months, like, I can't wait. I'm gonna put down the $500 to buy an Xbox One so I can play it on day one. That doesn't sound like that's going to occur all that often. Not only that, but I would much rather them be spending that money instead of trying to bribe developers of established franchises, use that money to create their own original IP. Like, I get it, exclusives are a necessary evil of the console war. That's the way that they can differentiate themselves from the competition. But what they normally do is that they will go to they'll go to an in-house developer, like Naughty Dog for Sony, for example, give them a truckload of money, a lot of development support, and be like, hey, create a fantastic game. The Last of Us came from this. The Uncharted series, games that normally wouldn't have been created because they didn't have the funds, but because they're backed by Sony or from Microsoft, we get these amazing titles. That is not what Microsoft did with their cash, with their money, their influence. They went to a third party, a game that normally would have come out on all the systems at the same time, gave them a boatload of money, essentially bribed them, and made it a timed exclusive. I get it. It is riskier to make your own IP, your own original games. It's a lot easier to just give money to a third party, to an established franchise where they already know a lot of people are going to buy that game. But even still, it doesn't sit well with me. I know it doesn't sit well with a lot of my friends and other gamers, and I just don't like the way that Microsoft handled the entire situation. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question that can be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below. Normally, I would say that you could send me a YouTube message, but for whatever reason, YouTube is getting away with the whole YouTube messaging system, so you can also send me a message on Twitter and Facebook. But until tomorrow, have a good one, and take it easy.